recalled Johnson's first attempt at
Oh, excuse me. Da 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 dum. Da 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 dum. Da 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 dee. 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 All right, guys, let's play.
In 1936 and 37, a young musician named Robert Johnson recorded 29 songs that would become some of the most influential blues music of all time. Johnson died about a year after he recorded his music. He was only 27 years old. His life wasn't documented very well, and there's a lot that we don't know about him. The one thing we do know is that although he's become a blues legend, he wasn't always so talented.
Probably not.
Before Johnson could play guitar very well, he often hung out around a juke joint where some famous blues musicians played and begged them to let him play their guitars during breaks. Son House, one of the bluesmen that played at the joint, recalled Johnson's first attempt at playing the guitar. Johnson used to play harmonica when he was around 15, 16 years old. He could blow harmonica pretty good. Everybody liked it, but he just got the idea that he wanted to play guitar. So when we'd get to a rest period or something, we'd set the guitars up and go out. It would be hot in the summertime, so we'd go out and get in the cool off some. While we're out, Robert, he'd get the guitar and go bamming with it, just keeping noise, and people didn't like that. They'd come out and they'd tell us, "Why don't you go in there and stop that boy? He's driving everybody nuts." I'd say, "Just leave the guitars alone." But we couldn't break him from it, and his father would get at him, dogged him so much that he run away. Robert Johnson disappeared for about 6 months. Son House was playing in a juke joint with his friend Willie Brown the night Johnson reappeared. Me and Willie, we was playing out at a place called Banks, Mississippi. I looked and I saw somebody squeezing in the front door, and I seen it was Robert. I said, Bill. He said, "Huh?" I said, "Look who's coming in the door. Got a guitar on his back." He said, "Yeah, no kidding." He said, "Oh, that's little Robert." I said, "Yeah, that's him." I said, "Don't say nothing." And he wiggled his way through the crowd until he got over to where we was. I said, "Boy, now where are you going with that thing? To annoy somebody else to death again?" He said, "I'll tell you what." He said, "This your rest time?" I said, "Well, we can make it a rest time. What do you want to do? Annoy the folks?" He said, "No, just let me. Give me a try." So I said, "All right, and you better do something with it too." And I winked my eye at Willie. So he sat down there and finally got started. And man, he was so good. When he finished, all our mouths were standing open. Robert Johnson had transformed into such an incredible guitar player that some folks believed it was unnatural, even supernatural. Rumor had it that during the 6 months he'd been away, Johnson had learned some guitar from a blues man named Ike Zimmerman. Johnson and Zimmerman had practiced at night in a graveyard. Other people believed that Robert Johnson hadn't stopped there in his quest to master the guitar. They said he'd sold his soul to the devil to gain his talent. Another blues man explained how this process worked. If you want to learn how to play anything you want to play and learn to make songs yourself, you take your guitar and you go to where the road crosses that way, where a crossroad is. Get there. Be sure to get there a little before midnight that night so you know you'll be there.
Okay, I'm just going to pause this here because I want to say something quick, guys. So when I was a kid, I actually tried this. I actually went to a crossroads. Now, there's some speculation on what you need to bring to a crossroads to actually make this happen. Now, obviously, with this kind of legend and lore, all they really say is you just show up there and somebody's supposed to come. But with the things that I've read online and when I tried it when I was a kid, you have to get like a black cat's bone. You need like something, and you need like a few other things, but the specific thing was like a black cat's bone, and you have to bury it in like the center of the crossroads. So where that guy's standing right there, you basically bury it there and you wait, and it has to be around midnight, 1 a.m. That's like the devil's hour, roughly around the midnight to 2 a.m. type vibe. I think maybe up to 3 a.m. I'm not too sure, but I know midnight is like kind of devil's hour, devil's time. Now, when I tried it, nothing happened. Now, obviously, I think you have to be in a particular mindset, and I think it was saying online as well that like the devil knows if you're serious or not. And I kind of agree with that, because I was thinking to myself as I'm doing it that I don't think I would do it, because what if it worked and you actually get what you wanted, but then you have to remember all that stuff is real. Once you die, that's it. You're for eternity. You're going to be in hell. So it's like, it's very, unless you don't care, you're dead set on it, I don't think it's going to work. Because again, I think the devil knows if you're serious or not. And maybe he was very serious, Robert Johnson. Maybe, but maybe he didn't believe it either. Maybe he was skeptical. So you have to wonder, because most people nowadays would be skeptical about this. But back then, I think their beliefs were a lot stronger than they are now. Especially just because of how the world lived back then and whatnot. So, anyways, let's continue.
You have your guitar and be playing a piece there by yourself. A big black man will walk up there and take your guitar and he'll tune it. And then he'll play a piece and hand it back to you. Many of Johnson's own lyrics seem to point to a supernatural force behind his music, leading many to suspect that he had gone to the crossroads and made a pact with the devil. Songs like Preachin' Blues, Crossroad Blues, Hellhound on My Trail, and Me and the Devil Blues invoke the haunting imagery of being chased by hellhounds and answering a knock at the door to find the devil standing outside. As Johnson rose to local fame, Son House tried to warn him about the dangers of working in juke joints. The women all liked Robert. He was a good-looking boy. And when he got good enough to perform, I used to tell him, when a gal pats you on the shoulder and says, "Play it again, Daddy," don't get too excited. She'll probably belong to someone else, and you might get yourself killed.
Good.
It seems that Johnson didn't take his friend's warnings to heart, because a short time later, he passed away, quite possibly poisoned by a jealous husband or boyfriend.
See, and this is a thing that a lot of people say as well, that he potentially was poisoned. Now, again, there's like articles that state that it was like syphilis or something like that. But again, it's all depending on kind of what you believe. There's not any hard evidence for kind of like either side. So I don't really know. Like, I think it could have been poison. Somebody could have quite potentially killed him. I mean, this was way back in the day. He was a young black man. And yeah, like white people, a lot of us were racist back then. I shouldn't say us, I'm not racist, but like, you know what I mean? My nationality, my race, white people were just racist back then, right? So he very well could have been murdered. It's sad, but that quite could possibly be what happened, because 27 is very, very young to die. But I don't know what the average age was. Like that guy, though, when I did this on Twitch, that Tommy Johnson, he lived in his 60s and died then, right? And that he was another guy that apparently sold his soul to the devil. So I don't know. It's all depending on what you believe, I guess.
But even his death was tainted by strange rumors. Many people who saw him on the day he died reported that they saw him crawling on his hands and knees, barking like a dog. Those witnesses suspected that it wasn't poison that brought about his demise, but the devil coming to
That's
collect his
weird.
due.
That's weird.
10 years after Robert Johnson's death, his music achieved national fame. And 30 years after his death,
Born
he was honored as a
1911,
legend
died
in the Rock and
1938.
Roll
That's
Hall of
sad,
Fame.
you know. Like I'm 23. That's 4
Thanks for
years away
watching.
from me.
I hope you enjoyed this story. For more like it,
That's very interesting. I think this is definitely. Where was it? Here we go. This is the one I wanted to watch after because
The Forex.com app.
I think this is
one-stop
kind of
trading to enjoy
what we're
lightning
into,
fast
maybe?
trading wherever you.
The first 260 people to click the link in the description are going to get a
yeah.
massive in metal or the legendary.
Okay, let's back this up.
If folktales are to be believed, the devil seems to have quite the interest in music.
Yeah.
Whether it's the satanic imagery that's ever pervasive in metal or the legendary fiddle duel in The Devil Went Down to Georgia, it would appear that the Prince of Darkness likes a good tune as much as you and I. But there's one tale of the devil in music that captivates like no other, and it's one that's been told for centuries. The Deal with the Devil.
Yeah.
Nearly everyone knows this kind of
Everybody
story
should
now,
know it.
and that's because it has a rich history dating back several centuries.
That's another thing I wanted to mention, everybody. I got 0 viewers right now, but anybody watching this maybe on YouTube, I don't know. Hold on.
Excuse me, boss. You have a text message.
So one thing I wanted to mention is, you know, all these stories, these urban legends, everything that's been created over time, especially this, it's came from somewhere. You know, like someone had to have either A, thought about it, B, it actually happened and it's based on like true accounts, or C, it's loosely based on true accounts, meaning something happened kind of like what they're talking about, like selling the soul to the devil, but maybe not exactly selling the soul to the devil. Something to do with like maybe a ritual or something like that. You know what I mean? So loosely based on true events, and then over time it's kind of been over exaggerated and twisted, because we all know that happens, but that's something I believe, you know, so definitely could be possible.
Let's take a closer look. Deals with the devil have appeared in Western mythology for a long time, but they really first started catching on in the late 1500s thanks to a man named Johann Faust. Faust was a German alchemist and magician who was alleged to have made a pact with the demon Mephistopheles in return for his soul. His talent became famous after being documented in Christopher Marlowe's play, The Tragical History of Dr. Faustus.
Faustus.
100 years later,
cool
the
name.
myth first made its way into music thanks to Giuseppe Tartini. In 1713, the devil appeared to Tartini in a dream, and Tartini made a pact for his soul. In the dream, he gave the devil a violin, and the devil performed the most beautiful sonata he had ever heard. Immediately upon waking up, Tartini tried to write down what he heard and created the Violin Sonata in G, better known as the Devil's Trill Sonata. Despite the success of this piece, Tartini wrote that his effort was so inferior to what I had heard that if I could have subsisted on other means, I would have broken my violin and abandoned music forever. It would seem that the devil's interest in violin didn't wane, as rumors of another violinist cohorting with the devil came about a century later. Niccolò Paganini is considered by some to be the greatest violin virtuoso ever to have lived. He started music at the age of 5 on the mandolin, was composing by the age of 7, and performing live at 12. And he was such a virtuoso that the public began to surmise that his talents must have come from dark dealings. On top of his skills, Paganini had a pale, lanky look with long fingers and flaming eyes. The legends of his performances are something else to behold. Some reports say audiences made the sign of the cross as they watched him perform to protect themselves from evil. Other stories have him continuing to play flawless notes on broken strings and contorting his body into weird shapes while performing.
I
One
bet.
fan even left a Vienna concert claiming he had seen the devil aiding Paganini. At the age of 54, Paganini died, and
Oh,
one of the last
fuck.
things he did before he died was send away a priest who had come to perform last rites. This cemented his association with the devil in many people's minds. Less than 100 years later, legends of the devil meddling in musical
See?
affairs started once more. In the 1920s and 30s, a pair of blues musicians in the Mississippi Delta are alleged to have run into
Robert Johnson.
First came Tommy Johnson.
Tommy
a
Johnson and
guitar
Robert
virtuoso
Johnson.
known for his eerie yodeling. Johnson's brother Liddell spread the legend of Tommy's Faustian bargain. One night, the story goes, Tommy Johnson went to the crossroads just before midnight and played guitar until a big black man came up to him, took his guitar, and tuned it. After that, Tommy Johnson could play the guitar like no man alive. Outside of the alleged deal with the devil and his influence on blues music, Johnson's life was rather uneventful, though. That can't be said for Robert Johnson, unrelated to Tommy, another musician who apparently made a Faustian bargain.
And obviously, they're not related, but it's pretty weird that they have the same last name, Johnson, hey? And the coincidence that they both have the same apparent story of selling their soul to the devil and both apparently being musicians, right? Both musicians, I guess Tommy being like known for yodeling and whatnot, but you know, the same thing, right? And I shouldn't say apparently because they were musicians, but I mean, still, it's just eerie, you know? But again, they weren't related, so.
Johnson was one of the most impressive guitar players of his time,
Just
and
eerie.
one of the most important musicians of all time. And when he was a young man in the late 1920s, he started to play guitar, but apparently he had no talent for it.
See?
Fellow bluesman Son House famously remembered how Johnson played the guitar. Such a racket you never heard. It'd make the people mad, you know. They'd come out and say, "Why don't y'all go in and get that guitar away from that boy? He's running people crazy with it." I'd come back in and I'd scold him about it. Then one day, Robert Johnson left Robinsonville, where he had been living. When he came back, he was a changed man. Johnson returned with incredible guitar skills, sliding around the neck seamlessly while maintaining steady rhythms. Legend has it when Keith Richards first heard Johnson play, he thought it was two guitar players.
See?
Rumors started to
Like
grow
what?
that, like Tommy Johnson before him, Robert had sold his soul to the devil at midnight at a crossroads. And if you listen to Robert Johnson's music, it's easy to believe it too. Atop his virtuoso play, Johnson's lyrics have a haunting desperation to them.
And that is very true. A lot of his music, the majority of his music apparently has like connections with the devil, supposedly. If you've actually listened to them, you'd understand. But again, we'll
He
listen.
even sings of his relationship
See?
with the devil. Hellhound on My Trail
Yeah.
is a masterful song that takes the trope of the rambling bluesman and puts a new spin on it. The reason Johnson is a traveling, wandering vagabond is because he's got hellhounds following him. You can even look at this song as the middle of a trilogy of songs chronicling his run-in with the devil. Crossroad Blues is where he sells his soul, and then the trilogy
See?
ends with Me and the Devil Blues, which has some of the most haunting opening.
Uh-oh.
Sells his soul, and then the trilogy ends with Me and the Devil Blues, which has some of the most haunting opening.
Okay, I think it's just a video. But isn't that crazy? I think he had to mute it due to copyright, but it's one thing I wanted to mention. Even if he didn't, why would he name his music like that? You know? Or did he name it because people assumed? But still, why would you do that? It's just weird. You know what I mean? I don't know. Very weird. Why would you name it like this? Okay, I think something's wrong with this guy's video.
Jealous husband.
Okay, yeah.
For Robert Johnson's
There we go.
soul.
I think his
Johnson
video
was
was messed
poisoned
up.
by a jealous husband
apparently.
and died at just 27 years old. Since Robert Johnson, the devil has continued his relationship with music, but no Faustian bargains like that of Paganini or Robert Johnson have been struck, at least not that we know of.
See?
Though it's been nearly a century since Johnson, so maybe it's time for the devil to dip his toes back into the music game. Thanks to Skillshare, the first 260 people to click the link in the description are going to get a head start at making their passion a full.
Alright. So, Let's see here. Is there anything? Yeah. It's very weird and eerie. That's one thing I will say. Let's read the comments. Okay. Be careful. The devil doesn't come with horns, a tail, and a pitchfork. He comes as everything you think you've ever wanted. That's very good. It's actually true. Imagine playing, practicing, and perfecting the violin since 5, and everyone is just like Devil Man. Well, if he's only looking for talented people, I'm safe as fuck. I don't think the devil ever left the music industry. Tartini, after writing his sonata, this is not the greatest piece in the world. This is just a tribute. Yeah. See the replies. Most underrated comment in here. The greatest trick. This is what I talk about. The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. Yeah. Let's see. Do a part 2 of this. Yeah. Yeah, weird. Weird. Now, let's see if anybody's done a review on the Devil's Bible. Codex Gigas.
Still looking for a freelancer?
Alright, let's see, there we go. Let's look at this.
Is your website bounce rate sky high?
Probably, I
Find
don't
out
know.
why With Hotjar.
With Hotjar.
Hotjar shows you how people
Skip. Alright, let's watch, guys.
"13th century, within a Benedictine monastery in medieval Bohemia, a monk named Herman committed a terrible atrocity, one which not only broke his monastic vows, but warranted a death sentence. He was bricked behind the thick walls of the monastery, left to starve alone. Before the final brick was placed, Herman called out for mercy. To humor him, the abbot struck an impossible deal. He was to create a book, a tome of all the world's knowledge combined, and he was to do it in a single night.
One night.
Desperately, Herman accepted. The materials were shoved into the small gap in the wall. The monk wasted no time in starting. But as the night went on, reality set in. The task was impossible, and Herman was doomed to fail. Unless there was one last thing he could bargain with: his soul. That night, the monk exchanged his soul to the devil for a completed book, a monumental tome of the world's greatest works. As a nod of appreciation, the monk drew a full-page portrait of the devil within. The next morning, Herman handed the book over to the abbot, and his life was spared. This legend, which has been told since not long after the book's creation, does indeed have some merit. There are certain aspects about the book that, to this day, still leave archaeologists and historians confused and unsure how the book, known as the Codex Gigas, or the Devil's Bible, was even written. On top of this, there are legends of a curse that has followed the Devil's Bible throughout the centuries.
Fuck, that's eerie, hey?
I'm Mr. Mythos, and I welcome you to Truth or Lore. Be sure to subscribe if you love investigating.
Yeah, definitely hit the
mysteries of
subscribe
history
button, this
like I
guy.
do. Every sub is an incredible
voice is
support for the
insane.
videos I make on my channel. Without further ado, let's open the pages of this tome and uncover the truth in what makes this one of the most foreboding medieval manuscripts in the world.
In the world.
The Codex Gigas.
The Codex
Latin
Gigas.
for giant book. It's known by that name for one reason: its incredible size.
It's
36
huge.
inches
Look at
tall,
this.
20 inches wide,
Fucking
and nearly
massive.
9 inches thick. This monumental work weighs as much as a person. At 165 pounds, it requires 2 librarians to lift. Its binding is made from leather and ornamental metal. Its pages are composed of the skins of at least 160 donkeys. Within the book, every page is composed meticulously and with skill no lesser than absolute mastery, down to the illumination of every letter. As described within the legend, the world's knowledge contained within includes the entire Latin Bible, as well as Isidore of Seville's Encyclopedia Etymology, Josephus's Antiquities of the Jews, and Cosmos of Prague's Chronicle of Bohemia.
Okay, guys, I'm going to go take a dump. Yeah. I'm going to leave this play, though, because I've seen this, and I think it's very interesting, but I think a lot of you guys are going to like it. Mr. Mythos, you ever watch this, don't take it down. Like, I'm not trying to steal your content or anything. This is just, like, I think this is very interesting. You've done a very good job at this as well. But yeah, we're just exploring this story, the Codex Gigas, because I have it pulled up over here, for those that don't know. Yeah, here's all, like, a lot of the pages of the Bible. And then they describe a lot of it here. This is, like, from the government of, or Library of Congress, basically. So, yeah. Anyways.
Many smaller texts are dispersed throughout, notably writings on magic formulae, exorcism rituals, and a calendar. As with any decent mystery of history, 10 pages are curiously missing. No one is sure what they contained or why they were removed. Those pages have never been recovered. Besides its physical size, its most famous feature is a bizarre full-page depiction of the devil on page 290. This monstrous creature fills the otherwise empty page in full color and unique detail. With his menacing stare, curved claws, red horns, and 2 tongues. He is naked, with the exception of an ermine loincloth. Historians note that ermine is worn by royalty. In this depiction, the devil wears ermine to signify himself as the Prince of Darkness. What blurs the lines between myth and reality is the bizarre imbalance between the manuscript's relentless attention to detail and its sheer scope. Here's the thing. The text is heavily illuminated. What does this mean? Pages and letters are adorned with masterful skill throughout. Tiny illustrations, elaborate borders, stylized and decorated letters. Incredibly, and some experts say impossibly, the nature of the writing is completely uniform throughout. There are no noticeable signs of change in look or quality, not even in the slightest. We can draw 2 conclusions from this. First, the Codex Gigas was written by a single scribe. Second, the baffling uniformity from beginning to end suggests that it may have been written in a very short period of
Building your online business? Go to Wix.com and set up your store on a single integrated platform. Add products, showcase them dynamically, and seamlessly track your inventory. Accept multiple secure payments, and design your storefront down to the very last detail. Get all the tools you need. Drive more sales with customizable gift cards and flexible product subscriptions. Retain customers with a point-based loyalty program, email automations, and reach millions with sales channel integrations. Complete your setup with a personalized analytics dashboard. Make smart business decisions and shape the next phase of your business. Build, manage, and grow from one place. Go to Wix and launch your online business today.
time. Here lies the issue. The manuscript experts say this is not possible. The immense level of detail and gigantic collections of texts would have taken over 5 years of ceaseless writing, all day and all night, to complete. Even so, this estimate excludes many illustrations. Realistically, the experts state that it would have taken at least 25 years to write, and more likely 30.
See?
However,
Sorry, guys. Just got back.
there is still the problem of uniformity. Why does the scribe show no signs of aging, disease, mood, or even increased skill?
I don't
How
know.
can someone write for 30 years without wavering even once in nature or quality?
Exactly.
These are unsolved questions that give the legend of the Devil's Bible a run for its money. Experts genuinely don't know how such meticulous uniformity is possible for such a length of time. Even
Fuck,
with
that's
great
interesting,
intention
eh?
and dedication, there are still physical limitations to the human body that come with age, such as eyesight deterioration or arthritis. On the other hand, we should take a closer look at the portrait of the devil, as it is clearly one of the book's primary focal points. Throughout the Codex's history, it is likely that the book was displayed with this page open. But what many people don't know is that there is another full-page illustration directly next to it. Though we can't say for sure, experts believe that this depicts the kingdom of heaven. So as the book is displayed open, this double-page spread symbolizes the duality between good and evil. In this case, perhaps the drawing of the devil is a warning from the monk, as opposed to an ode of appreciation.
That could be it. Yeah.
More questions rise when looking
Depends
into
on
the
what you believe.
scribe's signature found within the text. It reads, Hermanus Inclusus. This small detail could either support or undermine the legend of the Devil's Bible. Hermanus is, of course, the monk's name, Herman. Inclusus, though, can be interpreted either one of two ways in Latin. Inclusus could signify a horrifying punishment, in line with the original myth. However, it could also be interpreted as voluntary isolation, hence a similarity to the English word recluse. In this view, the scribe could have chosen to withdraw himself from society and dedicate himself entirely to his life's work.
Huh.
So, there
It's
are
interesting.
certainly arguments for and against the legend. Mysterious origins aside, there is yet another legend that persists with this book.
Okay, let's listen to
The
this.
Curse of the Devil's Bible.
I don't think I've listened to this one.
Apparently, the Codex Gigas has been through hell through the centuries, and its owners with it. Whether or not it's true,
Yeah, I don't know
let's
if that's
humor
true.
this for a minute. In the year 1477, 200 or so years after its creation, the Benedictine monastery in Bohemia experienced some serious financial woes. To pay the bills, the monks decided to sell their most precious and long-concealed treasure, the Codex Gigas, to the Benedictine monastery in Brovnov. Soon after, the original monastery was destroyed during the Hussite Revolution. The book was kept in Brovnov until 1593, when they lent the Codex Gigas to Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II in Prague.
Look at that
Of
handsome
course,
bugger, huh?
To their luck, he decidedly never returned this rental.
Of course he didn't.
Why?
I knew that.
Historians have revealed
But-
just how preoccupied Rudolf became with the Codex, particularly as an extension of his obsession with the occult. As the years passed, his rule became increasingly paranoid and erratic. His family took notice of his obsessive behavior and overthrew his position as king. Rudolf died in 1612, but the Codex remained. 6 years later, the 30 Years' War began. This brutal war ended with the Swedish army seizing the late Rudolf's entire collection of books and art, and discovering its unmissable treasure, Codex Gigas. It was brought to its final home, the Royal Library in Stockholm. But the curse was not yet finished. In 1697, a fierce fire engulfed the royal castle. In a last-ditch effort to save the book, it was thrown out of a nearby window, falling on and injuring an unsuspecting bystander.
Yeah, I've heard that. We read about that actually
Though
as
much
well.
of this so-called curse can be chalked up to mere coincidence, almost tame compared to other curses.
Yeah, no kidding.
This nasty reputation of the Devil's Bible is not a modern invention. Throughout the centuries, people have felt and feared its ominous aura. Yet this walk through history raises one last point of curiosity. If this was or is indeed an evil book, we have to face the fact that it somehow survived the Inquisition. During the Inquisition, the Catholic Church had nearly complete rule over Europe,
Yeah.
and anything deemed satanic or even remotely against the best interests of the Church was systematically sought out and destroyed, or in the case of human beings, tortured and executed.
Yeah.
Much knowledge and historical records were lost in this time, but not the Codex Gigas. In fact, it is one of the best preserved medieval manuscripts we still have today.
Yeah, isn't that
Yet
crazy?
So many questions remain,
Like how?
like those 10 pages torn and lost. And what of the baffling mystery of the unwavering penmanship of the scribe? As they say, the devil is in the details. Every last letter. Thank you so much for
Very well
watching.
done.
If you
Very well done, Mr. Mythos. Now, see, that's a very good, interesting, legend, right? Like, what and how could they have created such a thing? One person, 20 years? And it makes a good point, too, right? Like, over 20 years, you're writing. You're not going to be perfect all the time, right? And over the years, you're going to age. Things are going to happen. Like, for example, you age, you get a sore back. Sometimes arthritis happens, you're not as able to function as properly as when you were younger. So even if it did take 20 years, how could one person do that perfectly? Again, very, very weird. And I like this ending, how could it have survived? That's a very good thing. I totally forgot about that the church, yeah, they actually did that. They went and destroyed a lot of books, a lot of work. And a lot was lost actually through that period. I know I remember reading an article that there was a lot of books that could have been very beneficial, I guess, in today's day and age, as well as that could have been worth a lot of money. But again, the church destroyed it. They destroyed a lot of books and work. And I'm very just surprised that the Codex Gigas survived. And it looks really good for being 800 years old. You gotta admit, right? I guess for what a book can do, you look at it, right? It's perfect almost. And yeah, I didn't even think about the lettering though, but everything does look perfect. And mind you, this is in Latin, right? If you know how to read it, you can read it, right? This is in the Library of Congress. But yeah, it's just very eerie, very interesting. And obviously this was made in 1200 to 1230. So, I don't know. It really depends on what you believe, I guess. That's the only thing that we can really say. It's like this story with Robert Johnson, right? It all depends on what you believe. Because do you believe that the devil helped him create it? Who knows, right? It's very eerie, a lot of coincidences, and just a lot of weird things that kind of lean towards that argument, right? That the devil did have some sort of doing with it, especially when you consider the monk, right, having to do it in one single night. If it took 20 years to do it, and the experts have looked at it, and it's only one person, that's just insane. It's very interesting, very weird, and I definitely think something fishy's going on with it, honestly. I think this is something that more people should be taking note of, But yeah, that's just crazy in and of itself, right? Let's look at the comments. Oh, so there's a part 2. Might as well watch that. That is true, yeah, the 10 missing pages of the Codex Gigas. Let's watch this.
It was a Friday afternoon in May of 1697 when, seemingly under a blink of an eye, a hellish, all-consuming fire set ablaze in the royal castle of Stockholm. The king, the queen, the princess, and the corpse of Charles XI were evacuated to a nearby island as the keep tower, known as the Three Crowns, collapsed into the flames. The wood floors of the castle were as dry as bones, and within half an hour, the entire castle raged with fire. It would only be minutes before it reached the royal library. The chief librarian ordered his subordinates to shut the thick iron door to buy a few minutes to salvage what rare and precious works they could. They lugged piles upon piles of books until the stairway became too thick with smoke to breathe. Then they began throwing the books out of the windows. The Devil's Bible, Codex Gigas, was one of those who met that fate. As the massive 165-pound manuscript flew through the air, it is thought that that is when the 10 pages became loose from the binding and fell out. They were never recovered, and to this day, never seen again. 3 days later, a castle court was held to determine the cause of the fire. It was revealed that the chief fire watcher and his 2 lackeys had not been at their posts, and thus they were sentenced to death. The king
Jesus
later found
Christ.
this too simple of a punishment.
Sentenced to death? Like, I guess books are more important than people's lives back then, right? So.
And commuted their death sentences to 7 runs of the gauntlet each, to be followed by 6 years of back-breaking toil in a labor camp. After just 1 run of the gauntlet, the chief fire watcher died. The actual cause of the fire was never determined. Now, about those 10 missing pages of the Codex Gigas, which presumably were lost when the book was thrown from the library window. There's a massive problem with this theory. Upon close inspection, modern archivists have concluded that the missing section didn't simply fall out, but was deliberately cut from the binding.
That's weird.
Furthermore, about the contents of those pages, many scholars propose that they contain the rules of the monastery in which the book was originally made. But each page is massive, so it's extremely unlikely that these rules could fill 10 pages. This is backed up by these same scholars who state that the rules would fill 2 pages at the very most. There are no records of what was written in those 10 pages, only rumors. Spells of immortality, prophetic visions of the future, an ancient and forgotten text known only as the Devil's Prayer, which, if read aloud, could summon the apocalypse. If these 10 pages were intentionally removed,
Fucking weird.
what if the fire at the royal castle wasn't accidental? What if it actually was a grand distraction to cut them from the binding and get away with it? Is this perhaps why these massive pages, or even remnants of them, were never found? I'm Mr. Mythos, and you're watching Truth or Lore. Be sure to subscribe if you love
That's
investigating
friggin'
the
weird, man.
mysteries of history like
That
I
is
do.
weird.
This video is part 2 of my Codex Gigas series, so if you haven't seen the first video, go watch that first.
Yeah, go watch it,
Click
guys.
the link in the description.
If you haven't seen it, go watch it.
And if you've already seen it, well, I have more mysteries for you. We missed some pretty strange details the first time around. If you're ready, let's begin with the sins of Herman the Recluse, the confessions of the monk.
Forex.com.
Oh my God, I gotta get like an ad block or something.
With innovative tools.
There are many little details in the Codex Gigas that point to a guilty conscience on the part of the author. We need only look at the sheer size of the manuscript to see that this is not a book made for practical use. one must both stand and then crouch to read a page in its entirety. The text is relatively small, and on a page such as this, it becomes impossible to consult as a reference, especially when considering the scope. Why were there so many vast texts included in one book instead of split into volumes? There is one explanation. If the Codex Gigas wasn't meant to be used as a book in the traditional sense, it may have been written as a punishment, whether self-imposed or forced upon him, or, following the original legend, a ridiculous plea to avoid certain death. There is an old medieval belief that it's possible to atone for one's sins by copying holy texts, so the guilt theory does make some sense. In a tale that predates the creation of the Codex Gigas, a monk had sinned greatly in his lifetime, but happened to be an incredibly accomplished scribe. After he died, he showed his works to the gates of heaven. Every single letter he transcribed was counted and weighed against his sins.
That's
And
nuts.
at the end of the count, he had written just one letter more than the total number of his sins, and his soul was allowed to enter into heaven. Following the theory of Herman's guilt, he includes a long and rather disturbing confession of his sins, located just before the picture of heaven. This text is unlike any other in the entire Codex, as it is written entirely in capital letters, twice the size of the rest of the scribe's writings. It runs 5 entire pages, placed against dark-colored panels, revealing that Herman the Recluse had many times broken his priestly vows and sinned in both mind and body.
Ooh.
He admits to lust, envy, pride and gluttony, even fornication and bestiality. He then invokes the Holy Trinity, angels, prophets, and every Bohemian saint, desperately begging them for forgiveness. Then follows the famous full-scale designs of heaven and the devil, which are immediately followed by another strange and out-of-place text, comprised of several demonic conjurations and magic spells only known to be used in exorcisms. These were to ward off violent illnesses, feverish hallucinations, and some satanic monster known as Dino, who rips his victims apart with its 150 talons. Considering that these conjurations come right after the picture of the devil, were they included as some sort of protection? They're written in a similar font as the Confessions, so perhaps they're linked to the guilt of those sins in some way, or to the scribe's state of mind. One thing is for sure, Codex Gigas is the only medieval manuscript that places the Old and New Testaments of the Bible next to such extreme and invocative conjurations. Perhaps this is why the book is said to be cursed. There are, in fact, a few interesting reports of supernatural occurrences centered around the Devil's Bible. A report from 1858 states that a porter of the National Library of Sweden was accidentally locked into the library overnight
That's
after
crazy.
falling asleep during his shift in the same room that held the Codex Gigas. He woke up to the sound of several books slamming to the ground from the shelves. It was the dead of night. Only the shine of the moon revealed the books picking themselves up from the ground and hovering in the air.
That's crazy.
The room's grandfather clock, which was normally non-functional, began striking every hour, rapidly and loudly. The books danced around the massive codex, and finally, the Devil's Bible itself began to rise from its podium. The next morning, the porter was found under a table, terrified and babbling repeatedly about what had happened that night. The library staff eventually called family members and doctors who tried to bring the man back to his senses, but he was never the same again. His madness only grew worse, and he was eventually institutionalized in an asylum.
That's crazy.
About 20 years later, a young librarian's strange obsession with the book was documented by author Eugene Falstadt.
Documented.
Falstadt recounts that his friend August Strindberg began to regularly invite him and their friends over to the National Library sometime in the 1870s. He would ask them to come in the middle of the night, and as a librarian, he used his keys to open the doors. Guiding them through the halls, Strindberg would strike long matches and hand them to his guests. Finally, he retrieved the Devil's Bible, and in the glow of the flames, he would read aloud from the book. On a separate occasion, one newly hired staff reported that when August Strindberg showed him around the library, he guided him to the room that housed the Codex Gigas. Strindberg walked directly to it and flipped through the pages, mumbling to himself. After a minute, he turned back to the hiree and whispered, "Can you hear the voices too?"
Holy fuck.
Codex Gigas is the only known medieval manuscript that allows the devil to fill an entire page. He's massive and alone, placed in the empty landscape of hell between two giant towers. His stance is unnerving and frenzied, his forked tongue tasting the breath of the onlooker. He stares into your eyes as if he could strike out from the page at any moment. People have gazed upon this image for so many years.
I'd love to see this book in
The actual
person.
parchment has darkened from overexposure
Like, I'd love
light.
to.
On the page previous, we see a depiction of heaven, with rows of buildings behind red walls and towers protruding from those walls. Just like the devil, heaven is framed within two giant towers, exactly the same, which makes us ask, are these two locations connected? Or possibly even one and the same? Look closely at the city of heaven. There are no people in it. Empty buildings, no signs of life. And consider the history of this book in media and culture. Why are onlookers more pulled towards the devil's gaze than the empty holy city? These two pictures are the only full-page drawings in the Codex Gigas. Yet another mystery arises from the art.
Fuck, this is good.
There is a man standing in the margin of a page without any inscription or initials to identify him. In medieval manuscripts, portraits of authors are commonly found with their work and are labeled with their name or some identifier. It is thought that this man is Josephus, the author of Antiquities of the Jews. But why would he be the only author given a portrait? Why not Isidore of Seville or Constantine the African, two other authors whose work is found in the Codex Gigas? This is the only portrait in the entire book. The careful planning of the Codex is clear, so the omission of any identifier must have been intentional. So who really is this man? As a matter of fact, who was the scribe who created the Codex Gigas? Really, all of the writings, art, and decorations, sometimes very large and elaborate,
Yep.
all are confirmed to have been made by a single scribe. This is extremely unusual, as scribes were known to work cooperatively with illustrators. A picture in the Codex itself even shows this exact practice in action. His incredible learned skill, undeniable talent, and painstaking dedication are clear. This scribe was a prodigy and should have been well known in his time. Yet no other work of his has been found or identified, and where he was trained remains unknown. We only know him by his signature, Hermanus Hermitus, which brings us back to where we first started.
Unlock your full creative potential. Go to fxhome.com now and download the
Come
only
on.
video editing software you'll...
According to the legend, our monk and scribe, Herman the Recluse, was bricked into a wall for his sins and given the impossible task. of
And this is
writing
the
a
one that we
tome
just heard
of all
about in the
world's
first
knowledge
part.
in a
So,
single night.
again,
Desperate,
it's what do you
he sold
believe,
his
right?
soul to the devil to complete the book, and his life was spared. So what happened to Herman afterwards, as many of you asked in my previous video? Well, I found the end to the story. Herman the Recluse was freed from his prison, but never again could he regain peace of mind. He would become depressed, violent, plagued by dark thoughts, and his life became a never-ending cycle of inner torture. Finally, he prayed to the Holy Virgin Mary, begging her to save him from this eternal torment. She agreed to help him and remove this curse from the monk, and immediately after, Herman died. His pact with the devil was dissolved, and he was doomed to his fate long ago in those monastery walls.
Yeah.
The many mysteries of the Devil's Bible haunt us in modern times.
It's a very interesting book.
Did
I
the
would love to
scribe
see this
really
book.
sin so sickly? What compelled him to write such a tome? Why is heaven empty? And who was the mystery man in the portrait? You're encouraged to leave your theories in the comments below.
Very good video. That's weird, guys. It just goes to show you, like, a lot of weird stuff in the world. And you know what happened with this book? Who created it? Well, obviously a monk, but you don't exactly know who. Like, was it the devil? Or was it someone, or the work of 10 people that it just made it look like it was one person? Who knows? Right? Like, I don't know. A lot of theories around it. I just think this is a very interesting lore and legend. I think it's a very, very, very mysterious book. That could quite be the most, or I would say probably the most mysterious book in the world. Because is it really the devil's book? Is it like part of the devil, like hell, right? Yeah, I think it is. I mean, I definitely believe that the devil maybe had some sort of doing in it just because of the facts, especially with like experts believing that. It's like, I'm mumbling here, but that experts believe 20 years of writing for one person, more 20, 30 years. I don't know. You know, it's weird, but it's a very, very interesting topic. Let me know what you guys think of it, though. Seriously. That's going to be it for the little live stream here. It's been about an hour. I'll probably live stream. I'm going to try and live stream every couple days here. But yeah, we're going to just cover different topics like this. I would love to go over the Codex Gigas again sometime in the future. I definitely want to touch on more of the occult type things because I think it's a very interesting kind of topic, and I think it's a very interesting just kind of theology, if you want to call it that. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Yeah, hit the subscribe button, guys. As well, I do live stream now. I will be live streaming every once in a while here, so make sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more or you want to see me live again. Just let me know. And yeah, you guys, take care. Have a wonderful week ahead. It is Sunday, April 16th, so I hope you guys have a wonderful week.